Today everyone. Welcome to the 7th Annual Mindfulness Virtual Retreat. So we're really excited that all of you have really taken the time to be here today. And as I was just saying earlier, some of you have been on prior sessions as well. So thank you for taking the time. So my name is Chimidoga, and I will be your host / moderator for today's panel. Just a note again to let you know that all of the sessions will be recorded for our purposes. So just quickly on online Tibetan education, we are a purpose-driven volunteer initiative seeking to preserve the Tibetan religion, culture, and language by really providing an open space and platform for everyone to learn and connect. Our offerings include annual retreats, classes on Tibetan language, Buddhism, and meditation, as well as Lakar series. And some of our offerings this year include the meditation and mindfulness program, Lakar series, including how to deal with conflict in daily lives, importance of Buddhist view of emptiness, and also just additionally, our normal Tibetan language and Buddhism classes. So we've been doing this work since 2011. And I would be remiss if I did not mention and acknowledge each of the OTE team members for their dedication and hard work and for really making OTE successful and possible. And also the 7th Annual Mindfulness Retreat, kind of letting that happen. So just to quickly introduce each of us, there's Kishla Santarkila, Tenzin Dekyongla, myself, Tenzin Londela, Sultum Tenzila, and Tenzin Wodenla. So each of us are part of the online Tibetan education team. So every retreat, when we meet, we always try to incorporate various ways in which we can reduce our waste or just be mindfully aware of the waste that we're producing. So we have incorporated mindful walking sessions in our retreats in prior years. We've also taken on various initiatives on reducing waste, such as not printing papers and instead going digital with our agenda. We also asked retreat attendees to bring their own mugs for one retreat, and then for the next retreat, we ended up offering everyone a mug to reduce the use of plastic and also styrofoam cups. So it's only right that this year, we also have a session dedicated specifically to the environmental preservation and mindfulness. So this is our 4th session for today. As I mentioned earlier, we've hosted several sessions already, and it'll be a panel series with 3 wonderful speakers. So we have Stephanie Kunsang and Woden on how we can be environmentally aware and incorporate mindfulness on a daily basis in our consumption and waste creation. So before we go into kind of the panel series, I just wanted to introduce each of them briefly. Stephanie is a freelance sustainability and wellness writer who writes about health, the planet, and also being a woman. She researches and reports features for Green Matters, Parade Magazine, Business Insider, and more. We have Tenzin Kunsang. She was born and raised in India, immigrated to the US after completing her high school. Her interest to learn about the people and culture of China led her to live in Beijing post-college. Kunsang has her bachelor's in political science and retail from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a master's degree in sustainable international development from Brandeis University. For her master's paper, she performed field work in Kham, Eastern Tibet, focusing on rural waste management and the local and global impact of waste. Kunsang is passionate about the field of sustainability with a particular focus on waste and recycling. And lastly, Woden is an environmental engineer for the state of Massachusetts in the Bureau of Water Resources. She's also pursuing her graduate degree in engineering and public policy at Northeastern University. She has worked for 4 years implementing state and federal regulations in protecting the ground and surface water in the state. She finds the importance of proper regulations to be crucial in the protection of our natural resources. And so with that said, I'd now like to invite each of the panelists to kind of briefly talk about your work. Stephanie, I think we can begin with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie. Thank you for the amazing intro. As Chami said, I am a freelance wellness and sustainability writer. If you're wondering what that means, it means that I write digital content. So articles, slideshows, roundups, primarily about topics that relate to overall wellness and sustainability for different brands. So some brands I write for include Green Matters, Parade Magazine, Business Insider, and more. I found my way into sustainability, and I truly mean found, because I was not always an eco-conscious person through writing. So after I graduated college with a degree in journalism, I got a job writing about celebrities, of all things, and I felt burned out by that pretty quickly. And within a few years, I decided to quit and go freelance. And at first, I was primarily writing about health and wellness, but a few months into that, I had written enough articles about cancer, allergies, and other ailments to realize that all of this stuff was connected, from what's in our food to the packaging of our food, what's in our skincare to just the everyday items that are in our homes. And that realization brought me to the non-toxic vertical, which basically just means looking at different products, different chemicals, and food from a health standpoint, right? So is it really good for us? Does it contain chemicals? Does it contain toxins, carcinogens that are bad for our bodies, chemicals that cause cancer, allergies, skin irritants, and other health complications? I quickly realized that most things that were non-toxic also ended up being good for the environment. So that's things that have clean ingredients, natural ingredients, plant-based ingredients, free of parabens, free of phthalates, all that good stuff, and it's good for overall health. So once I found the connection between it's good for our bodies, what's good for our bodies also seems to be good for the planet, that's kind of how I got into the field. I'm really thankful to be here today talking about it because I think OTE is really onto something by linking sustainability with mindfulness. When we think of mindfulness, we might think of like yoga, meditation, journaling, religion, spirituality, right? Like any kind of activity that causes a person to slow down and be really present in the moment. But I like the connection we're drawing here today. It's something I hadn't really thought about before. By looking at sustainability through the lens of mindfulness, and that ultimately we can channel this mindfulness toward the environment and be mindful of the waste we're creating. Because I don't think it's often touted that way, but that's exactly what environmentalism is. Being mindful of the waste that you as an individual person create, and then on a larger scale, being mindful of the waste we create as a species or as a society. And the way that it's normally touted is the word impact, at least within like the sustainability sphere. Every action we take creates, like we've all heard this before, for a lack of a better metaphor, a ripple effect. But it's an impact, really. Environmental impacts are hard to see in the short term. And so when we throw something away, when we throw something in the trash, we tend to be disillusioned into thinking that that moment is over, that it ends there. But it doesn't. How many times have any of us woken up in the middle of the night sweating and panicking about whether the Poland Spring water bottle that we threw out in the trash made its way to like the actual correct recycling? Never. None of us have ever done that before. You forget about the water bottle immediately and you never think about it again, but the reality is it just doesn't disappear. It goes somewhere. Even if you stop thinking about it, it'll either sit in a landfill where it will probably never biodegrade or take hundreds, if not thousands of years to biodegrade, or it'll probably end up in the ocean or the waterways where it can pose a real threat to marine life. So you can also think about impact as cost. For example, when you pick up fast food that comes in a plastic bag and a styrofoam container, you always sort of think to yourself, okay, what is the cost of this food, right? But more than just a financial cost, there's a health cost because it's not really good for you. And there's also an environmental cost or an environmental impact. The food itself is probably full of additives that are bad for you, but also not great for the environment. And the ingredients probably weren't sustainably or locally sourced. And the plastic bag and the styrofoam that it came in will sit in the landfill probably forever, or like I said before, end up in the waterways, even if you trash it the right way, and even if you try to recycle it. So sustainability is all about impact. And if we can be mindful of that impact and we can understand that, we can do better ultimately, I think, for the planet. Climate change and global warming are big, somewhat enigmatic monsters in the realm of sustainability, and I don't expect any of us to tackle them today. We're not going to stop climate change today. We're not going to like solve the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, nor the disappearing ice in the Arctic. If you don't know, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a concentration of mostly plastic debris that ends up in the ocean. And it's the world's largest collection of plastic in an ocean. It's a result of a gyre, I think is how you pronounce it, or a large system of like the ocean's currents, and it brings it all together. all the debris, and it's estimated to be twice the size of Texas right now, and it's a really big problem for our oceans. I also mentioned the Arctic. Ice is disappearing in the Arctic as a result of the average global temperature going up. As the ice disappears, so does habitation for polar bears and other Arctic life down there, which causes a lot of problems, a disproportionate change in the ecosystem and also the food chain. These issues are big issues, really far out of reach issues in the grand scope of things. And like I said, we're not going to solve them today, but the most effective way to indirectly tackle them is from inside your own home, focusing on the small stuff, because the small stuff has a really big impact. That's something we can maybe not solve, but we can kind of contemplate today together, ask questions, and resolve to make changes in our own daily lives. I like to give people very actionable steps. Talking grandiosely and generally only does so much. So if you're listening right now and you're wondering, okay, well, these are big problems, like how does this pertain to me? What can I do? We can start here. One is plastic. Plastic is one of the worst offenders. It's bad for your health, bad for the environment. If there's ever a scenario where you cannot choose a plastic option, go for that other alternative. It ends up in our landfills, in our oceans, in our waterways. It causes threats to animals. It can kill them. It can make them sick. It takes hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, to break down. So by limiting your single-use plastic, and that's plastic that is designed to only be used once, so like packaging or saran wrap, bags, things like that, you can significantly lower your environmental impact. To do that, you can try to buy foods not wrapped in plastic. You can store foods in reusable containers like glass or silicone bags instead of using like a Ziploc. And you can always try to look for the sustainable option, because while it might not be totally mainstream, there are definitely things that exist, other options that exist. And if that sounds like something you're interested in, I personally recommend a website called earthhero.com. They have a ton of sustainable alternatives that you can swap out in your home. The second thing that I think is an actionable step that we can all try to do in some form is compost. Compost refers to food scraps and like a few other things that that break down too, like untreated cardboard and paper. And these scraps 100% break down naturally if they're in the right environment. Plastic can't be composted. Food scraps like fruit and vegetables, eggshells, meat, bread, and some other scraps can be added to a compost pile. And with the right amount of oxygen and CO2 and nitrogen, it's much more complicated than that, but I'm simplifying it right now. That food waste will actually break down into soil, and you can like repurpose it by adding it to a garden or adding it to your backyard. So the next time you like cut a pepper and have all that excess core, or the next time you peel a banana, you know, you can save those food scraps instead of just chucking them, because even in the landfill, they won't entirely break down because the environment isn't right. You can start your own pile in your yard. You can buy a compost bin that uses worms to break down the food scraps faster. Or you can even, depending on where you live, just Google like compost near me, and there are some composting facilities that actually will arrange with you to like come to your house and pick it up or let you drop it off. And then the third actionable thing that I hope you consider doing is making a zero waste kit of sorts. So there are a few like sustainable items I always try to have on hand. I keep some in my purse, I keep some in a backpack, I keep one in my car. And if you have them on hand, you're more likely to make the more sustainable choice, rather than if you're out and you don't have the option, you're going to grab, you know, for the plastic fork. So the things that I'm talking about that can go in the kit are reusable water bottle, an insulated on-the-go mug. Places like Starbucks actually let you fill your cup, your own cup with their drinks. A bamboo or some kind of reusable fork, spoon, and knife set. They make sets on Earth Hero, like I mentioned before. A reusable straw, and then a reusable tote bag if you're ever out and you know you have to bring, you buy something and you have to bring something home. So yeah, that's the main gist. Just to summarize, the three actionable things you can be mindful about your environmental impact are avoiding buying plastic as much as possible, composting your food waste if you can, and keeping a few zero waste items on hand. The key here the key point that I want to end on is not to be overwhelmed. Making sustainable choices doesn't mean making perfect sustainable choices. There's a very common saying about we don't all need to be doing sustainability perfectly. We all need to be doing it imperfectly. So just being mindful of the impact of each of your actions is, for right now, sustainable in itself enough.
Thank you, Stephanie. Kunsang, I think you're next.
All right, that was wonderful. So after that big overview, I'm going to talk about my personal journey as well, kind of personalize the whole my journey and things that I do. So I think that will tie in. It will be a good follow-up to what Stephanie talked about. So let me see. All right, so everyone can see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, good. All right, so hello everyone. My name is Tenzin Kunsang. Before I get started, just want to thank the OT group for organizing this wonderful panel. I haven't checked out your other events, but from what I read, it looks really extensive, and I can't imagine how much effort went behind that. So thank you for this, and also to Woden for thinking of me and inviting me to talk about something that I'm really very passionate about. And just like Stephanie, it's something of a journey that I wasn't always aware, but had been engaging in from time to time. But now it's kind of become like a full-on passion that I kind of really career-wise want to dedicate my life towards. So, all right. I will apologize if I sound a little unprepared. It's because I am, and if I sound a little nervous, I am, because I just packed in a lot of information. So like Stephanie said, just don't get overwhelmed. Just try I'm going to present some data and numbers and things. It's just to kind of make people aware of the vastness, which I think in this day and age of social media, I think we are all aware, but I think having some numbers kind of helps. But again, like Stephanie said, everyone has to do their share. So it's not just one individual's job. And the fact that you are here today trying to learn about it is a really good first step. Excuse me. All right. So hang on through my lame jokes. Let me see. Oops, sorry, I'm having trouble with my PPT. So a little bit about me. So Woden talked pretty much about my background. Not sure what more I can add. So my journey kind of began really through, I don't know, I grew up in India where, waste is kind of rampant, but when I was growing up, it wasn't as dire. I don't think at the time, the world consumption was that big. Although we did see waste all around us, especially in rural areas where it's not managed well, which is unfortunately the case with the rural places around the world. So even then, seeing waste, just kind of never really thought much about it. We take waste from the house, and then in Damsala, there's one hill by in a community where everyone would dump it. So never really gave a thought. And then when I came to the US, my mom had already settled, and then she would tell me about recycling and things like that. Again, it was something that I would do, but not really consciously think about it. Just do it because, that's the right thing to do. But then as I kind of started working in the various nonprofits, I worked as office manager and operations manager, and kind of, again, took care of recycling and all of that, in addition to other job duties, and just realized that, kind of reusing things and like that really helps save nonprofits that's already kind of restrained for money. So help saves money. And so again, kind of was very limited in how I thought about it, and doing it just because, you know, like it's the right thing to do. But I think like, and my understanding kind of really took shape when I started my graduate education and really started to look into the issue of waste, which was just kind of like a research project for me to get through my master's. But the more I learned about it, the more passionate I became, and kind of really understood why, you know, kind of minimizing waste in the world is important, especially as consumption is going up all around the world. So yeah, so my journey took me to Tibet, and okay, I forgot to switch my slides. But anyway, so this is just a little bit more about me, just kind of like a snapshot of what I'm passionate about, and things that I do professionally right now on a mostly volunteer basis, as a way to kind of, you know, make connections and get into the industry. But also the more I learn, like the more it impacts my day-to-day life. And, you know, so I'm trying to incorporate as much sustainable habits as possible. So like composting, and trying to buy things not in bulk, and just kind of, sorry, I don't mean bulk like in packaging, but just try to, you know, go to bulk stores and shop with them, rather than buy a new bottle of shampoo or soap or something like that, which right now, like in the pandemic, is a little bit hard to do. So going back to what I was talking before, so like everyone else, I used to think naively about, like, this is the pristine vision I had of my homeland. But then when I actually started to study, you know, it just was horrifying. I mean, not surprising per se, but just kind of jarring of how I used to think Tibet, and then what I actually witnessed on the ground. So I focus on rural waste management using Eastern Tibet as a case study. And then amidst this like beautiful, beautiful landscape, you see trash thrown around like in the water by the rivers, just kind of heartbreaking. And then you can see there's open dumping and open burning. So that just kind of like really sealed the deal for me in wanting to do something for the world, and you know, for my own community in Tibet or wherever we are. So, which is why I really appreciate this opportunity today to talk to you all about waste. So I'm going to go on some like big data. Again, if it doesn't make sense, I'll be sharing my PowerPoint, which you will have for later. So just kind of follow along to the best you can, but I try to make it as understandable as possible. Hopefully I've succeeded somewhat. So as you may know, the world population is growing, and along with it, waste is growing as well. So in 2016, we were 7.4 billion people in the world consuming 2.1 billion. And in 2050, we are projected to go up to 9.8 billion people in the world. And we would be creating 3.5 billion tons of waste. So these are some really big numbers, but you know, what does it really mean? So I have tried to simplify, hopefully to kind of make sense of these numbers. So globally, we are about, you know, over 7 billion people, and we discard, we create enough waste that will fill up these container ships, one container ship every 2 hours, and 12 of these every 24 hours, and within a year, 4,570 of these. And the current global population is estimated to be 7.8 billion, and 7.8 billion of us on a daily basis create an average waste of 1.6 pounds. So narrowing down to the US, Our current the data as of 2017, we are 325.1 Americans who generate almost 268 million tons of waste. We are only 4% of the global world population, but we generate 12% of the global waste, which is very problematic and probably not surprising. But again, 4% of global population creating 12% of global waste. So something for us as living in the US to think about. So in terms of like the larger overview of waste management, how we manage waste in the US. Again, 2017 data, these are all from the US Environmental Protection Agency's number. So this is a pie chart, kind of pretty telling of how wasteful we are as a society in the US. So of all the waste that we produce, over half of it is landfilled. So, which is not good for the environment. And unfortunately, only 35.2% of it is recovered through recycling and composting. And the rest is, turned to energy. So we're commonly known as waste to energy. So you can read the description here. I won't go over it. Again, this will be available to you. So, and if you want to find out more, in each of where I've listed stats and stuff, you can refer to the sources in each slide to find out more. So down to the individual American. So per person, we generate a total of 4.5 pounds of waste a day, of which 2.3 is landfilled, only 1.1 pound is recycled, and then half of that is composted. Sorry, not half of our total consumption, but 0.5 pounds is composted, and then again, the rest goes to waste to energy. So again, if we did a pie chart, this is our individual habits are individual habits kind of coincide with what the national landscape is. So again, more visual. So at the household level, by the time we have a bag full of waste, we have to realize that 70 waste bags have already been produced upstream in the extraction and production process. So again, very startling numbers and visual, I think. All right, so with regards to climate change, if we lack of or improper management of waste creates contributes 5% to the global greenhouse gas emission, but if managed properly, it has proper waste management has the potential to reduce GHGs by 15 to 20%. So while it only emits 5%, the reduction of it or proper management of it has the potential to have an impact 3 or 4 times of what is emitted. And when I say waste management, I want us to think systematically, of which like we are part of the system too. So it's not just like services the government, your local government provides, but what we as regular people, citizens, how we contribute through our consumption and through our recycling, composting, those kind of habits. And I also wanted to share a little bit about the waste industry. Some of you may know, but just to kind of, have a greater appreciation for the industry and the people who work within it. So as you may know, waste management service providers and the workers are considered essential for public health and sanitation, just like nurses and doctors, police are. It is one of the most dangerous profession in the world. And the US, it is the 5th most dangerous profession in the world. The industry suffers from high number of fatalities and injuries. And my suggestion is, and this is something that I did and that I found very impactful and kind of helpful in my journey to be mindful about the waste I create, was signing up with my city to go on a tour to all these waste management facilities. So I took a tour of a local landfill. It was a one-day bus trip. It was like a full day trip. We went to a landfill. We went to the recycling facility, and we went to the composting facility. And it was just really quite something to see the conditions under which waste workers work, and that made me understand like why the industry professionals have such a high rate of fatalities and injury. So a little bit of appreciation for our waste workers. And it's the pandemic, it just consumes us on a day-to-day basis. And so thought it's only apt that I talk a little bit about the impact of COVID on waste. Probably not surprising, but waste in the US has increased from 30 to 40% in many communities. And the waste workers are working double, triple time to pick up our waste just to catch up with what's coming out of our households and businesses too. They're not exempt. So now, because resources are kind of stretched with the with this health crisis, it's putting a financial strain on many communities, especially the smaller municipalities and cities. Some of them are shutting their services or suspending them, which just kind of, exacerbates the problem. So, and also service workers are working longer hours and under greater risk amidst the pandemic, which is understandable, like how, then this leads to greater and increased risk to COVID-19. So what we can do to help and this is something I read and I heard on the news too, was making sure the first point, like this has kind of, actually these have always been the case, it's not just special to the COVID situation, but when you throw your recyclables, just make sure that they are clean, and especially now, clean and sanitary for the safety of the people who are taking care of our waste and recycling. But kind of from like an economic perspective, having clean, these our recyclables are really like sellable goods. So if the cleaner they are, the easier it is to sell. So that's another consideration. So, and then when you put trash, like we have tissues and things like that. And right now with this virus, this really creates a really dangerous situation for the sanitation workers. So just make sure that we are closing our trash bags and like sealing them well, and then closing the carton containers and making it easy. This really hard job of the sanitation workers a little bit easier. So some of the things that, some other things that we can do is, if you probably have heard about the R's, so if at least just remember these 3 R's, and that's something I try to remember too, because there's so many R's I can't keep track of them. But reduce, reuse, recycle, that's kind of like the basic tenet that I try to follow. But like I said, there's tons of R's. So right now I found 8, and I added 1 of my own, the last one, repurpose, which is 9, but it just can kind of go endlessly. So I'm going to go through quickly. I just have some examples that folks can read through later, but rethinking is like the first process, and Stephanie touched on that too. Just when you are there, before you make any purchases, like think about what you're buying. Like, do you really need this? And I'm not like telling all of this as if like, I've kind of gone to the other side. Like these are things that I struggle with, and I practice myself. So So rethinking, like, just your dollar is your investment. You make your choices known to the businesses or to the corporation. So it's very powerful. Like that momentary, that moment you take to think has a lot of impact downstream on the waste you create. So refuse, I have started doing that a lot. I refuse single-use items all the time, and I'm very forceful about it. If I'm ordering from from a restaurant, I'll just note it in the online order, and I will call them up and just make sure that they do not put any of these single-use items. Even if it's compostable, the issue is with the single-use items, whether it's plastic compostable. And then again, reducing your consumption. Shopping minimally or sustainable packaged products when you can afford to. Reuse is kind of very common, like reusing grocery bags. And then the kit that Stephanie talked about is really good. I've done that and it has really helped curb my waste a lot. And then repairing, this is something those of us who grew up in India, like we're very familiar. We had cobblers on the street ready to fix our shoes or tailors to fix our clothes. So something that I really miss about growing up there, but a little bit tougher to do in the US because these are expensive services. So learning to do it on your own is great. And there is, we have Fix It Clinic here in the Denver area, and it's actually a community-based kind of initiative that any community member can start if you don't have a Fix It Clinic in your community. So I have put a link there. You can learn more about it. It's, I've been to one and it's really amazing. And it doesn't cost anything, like you just have to go, it's all volunteer based and people just bring the stuff in to get fixed by people like me who will kind of learn to fix some stuff. Regifting, I do that a lot. No shame in the regifting game. So anything from the heart will be appreciated. But I think this is again something within my own community, like there's a little bit of a stigma about secondhand items, but but if you're thinking about mindfulness, this is something that we have to kind of get over and kind of think about why regifting is actually a good thing, and not because you're being disrespected. And recover. So be creative, stuff you have, just upcycle. So something that you have, just making it, getting a better use out of it. Become a DIYer. But anyway, so that's something that I do a lot. I DIY a lot, and I am really grateful to YouTube and all the people who create the content there. It's been really helpful for me, and I will share some of my DIY projects. And recycle, kind of again obvious, donate to charity or sell online. I've done that a lot over the years, and since 2018, like I started to track my quote unquote sales and quote unquote profit, and up to date I calculated that I have generated over $3,000, so average of $1,000 per year. And the profit I've made is about like half of that is profit. So, all right. And if you are putting your stuff in the recycling bin, this is something that I'd like to talk a little bit, hopefully after the talk, after I'm done with my presentation, is follow your local recycling guide. It is very important. Just check with your city or municipality to see what their recycling, landfilling, and composting guides are, and then follow according to that. And if you don't know the answer, try to look for answer, or call up the local officials for answers. And repurpose. So there are many manifestations of how you can an object can be used. For example, like a vase for flowers can be turned into container for your kind of cooking utensils, which I have an example here sitting. If I have time, I'll show it to you. So again, creativity plays a big role. In terms of my daily practice, again, like I was saying, perception change. So learning all these data and my actual field experience in Tibet and like ongoing here in my daily life is I've really changed my perception of you know, I don't like calling it waste, garbage, or trash. I think these are outdated terms, but really to think of them as resource, because that's what really they are. And then I think it just kind of changes your behavior towards how you treat the things you uh, uh, possess or acquire. So and also knowing, you know, the impacts of waste, is minimizing it, is really for me an act of compassion. It's hard to do, uh, but you know, it's something that I've over the years, like, and I still continue to try to do. And composting. I love composting. It just, as you can see, this is just from my this week's of compost, and I generated, like, my household generated like about 3.5 pounds of waste. If I wasn't composting it, this would be going to the landfill. And just a side note. So even though I'm composting this, you know, this is still considered food waste, and food waste is a whole different issue that's a huge topic here for us in the U.S. So maybe again I can touch on it if it comes up. But yeah, so composting really helps me reduce my waste, and if you have an opportunity to do it, highly recommend it. I do set aside money to do that. It's not cheap, I'll admit. And then again, going back to, you know, recycling, composting, and landfilling properly, like knowing what goes where, because not everything can be recycled. There are no recycling fairies at the end, like, you know, taking all the stuff that you put in your recycling. So there's some items that can't. So if you don't recycle properly, it creates contamination issues. So which then kind of, you know, doesn't help in the end, even though you mean well. So if there are things that I can't recycle with my city, I really try hard to find other places where I can recycle. For example, contact lenses and the packaging, things that the city won't take. And then, you know, I've never discarded in the toilet, in the, like, flushed it down, but I've definitely thrown it in the landfill. But I learned that there are places that will take these contact lenses and the packaging. So so I'm looking for an eye doctor who will do that. But then also, like, you know, find places where you can dispose of unwanted stuff, like, responsibly. Like scrap metals and things like that, they do not go in most cities recycling bin, I think.
So, Kunsang, I'll give you the 2-minute warning.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm almost done, thank God. So budgeting. So this is kind of not directly related, but it really helps. So being sustainable is not cheap. So so tracking my expenses and has helped me notice my spending pattern and then adjust the spending accordingly. And if there's things that I like, if I save, then I use it to buy sustainable stuff that usually I don't, and then, or I save it and put it in my bank. I'm happy to share my template for anyone who wants it. And then organizing. So organizing has been really helpful. Like, it helps me take stock of my belongings. And so knowing what you own is important. So that way you don't make, unneeded purchases. I stay informed and I continue to learn about waste issues. And like I said, I love DIY. So I just kind of wanted to share some things that I've done, like with these cotton wool that I got. I learned to make these easy toys that I've gifted to friends. And I have a link to the video as well on how to do it. And another thing that I did is take a simple paper bag and, these gift wraps that I received, just kind of stuck it on and just made a pretty gift bag out of it. And here, taking an old nightgown, using the Amazon packaging as a base for my pattern, and then making DIY like coffee filter. So I haven't had to buy paper coffee filters for a long time. And just another one, like the tissue holders, the cleanest plastic ones, kind of took the pattern and made it out of cloth from, like, these are the packaging for my bed sheets and stuff. So I didn't know what to do with them and just turned them into these tissue holders. And just another packaging that I just turned into like gift tags. So my upcoming project, actually, my computer is sitting on it as my rice cooker that is perfectly fine, but I don't know what's wrong with it. So I need to figure out, like, learn how to fix it. So that's on my list. I have to make more coffee filters, and then I have these like beautiful ceramic bowls that I broke and was not happy, but I learned about this Japanese art of kintsugi, and it's a very powerful concept where you know, it's the art form of just repairing using gold. And why I think this is powerful is because usually when things are broken, you know, we think of it as like not beautiful or something to be discarded. But what this process does is it, with the gold filling, it highlights the weakness of the object and just kind of makes it more beautiful. And as you can see from these two pictures, like, these are really amazing. And so I'm kind of looking forward to doing that. Again, I have included the video link that I found. Share that with you guys. So my challenges, not surprising, is plastic packaging is just overwhelming. And then affordability. So buying sustainable stuff is not cheap, at least right now. There's not the scale. So most of it kind of almost feels out of reach. But in that process, again, for me, budgeting has helped. And then, you know, you face with impossible choices. Now look at this, like, you have organic, like, I want to buy organic stuff, but it is in plastic packaging. So it's either it's kind of a greenwashing, or the people who are making this, they're not being mindful about the product, so they're just kind of catering to the consumer market. Like, okay, everyone wants organic, so we'll put it in plastic. Like, to me, that doesn't make sense. So sometimes, you know, you end up having to make a choice between your personal health and the planet's health, which eventually affects you as well. So that's the end of it. So I have a lot of resources that I found helpful and kind of put together for you. And books, these are books that I'm kind of wanting to read. It's on my list right now, but I heard good things about them, so I'm kind of excited, but I wanted to share with you as well. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. And if you want to connect with me post-talk, my email address is here. And especially for the Tibetans, if you want to talk about my experience in Tibet or more about waste issues and how it relates to a community, I'd be happy to do that. So.
So thank you so much, Tenzin Kunsang. And I hope, because some of the products you've made will be available for sale, so people can But yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And now I'd like to ask Tenzin Woden to share a little bit.
Let me go on full screen. Okay. So hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, and Acha and Steph both. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and I think Acha, you've provided a lot of stats that's very interesting and very important for us to know. And I think, and as well as your DIY projects, I think those are very like practical and some things that we can do now, right? So I think thank you for that. Just briefly about me. So I come from a very technical background. I'm an engineer in training. And as Chimi has mentioned, I've worked in the water field for almost 4 years now. So my presentation today will be more from a technical perspective. And it will be discussing the issue more in relation to water. So, oh, how does that? Okay, so you just click it. So I'll be talking about, I'll just give a basic overview of hydrology, what it means, how it works, how our waste ends up into our water resources, how our consumption habits and waste creation comes back and affects us directly, and what can we do about it. So as you can see, it's, I didn't edit that, but there is a cycle of our consumption and our consumption habit, it puts a demand on production and the large corporations, and that affects the environment, and the environment affects us in return. So it's all a cycle, and it's all interdependent. So what we do affects the environment greatly, and what happens to the environment affects us. So first thing, what's a watershed? We're all living in a watershed currently. A watershed is an area through which all the water collects. And so it goes to the lowest point and collects into streams, rivers, lakes, and then eventually into oceans. So that means that everything that we do, wherever we are, that makes a big difference on how our water is impacted. And the way hydrology works is it just flows by gravity. So water flows at the lowest elevation and it flows by gravity. So I think with that basic understanding, it's pretty obvious too, and most of you have already, you've heard about this and know about this already. So, okay. So if our situation right now was as clear as, or as green as the image here, then we wouldn't be having this, this conversation or this issue to begin with. If nature was the way it was, you know, green and pristine, we wouldn't have to talk about pollution. However, the condition we live in is, looks something like this, where we're creating a lot of garbage, a lot of waste, and we're mindlessly creating them. So one thing I wanted to mention is our meditation teacher has constantly says that, you know, meditation awareness comes with meditation. And I feel like us just being here and being aware of all of this issue makes us more mindful of on how to be, how to preserve or how to practice environmental preservation. And I feel like just by you being here, now you're more aware. And once you're aware of something, you can't be unaware, right? So I think we are already taking one step forward. So the next thing is then how does our waste end up in our water resources? So with the basic understanding of how hydrology works, it's pretty clear that our waste via gravity, it all ends downhill, right? And when it rains, when there's a storm, there's something called stormwater runoff that carries all of our waste, and it goes just down, it just flows downhill. And where does it end up? It ends up in our water sources, and it carries solid waste like our bottles, plastic bags, papers, whatever you throw in the trash. It also carries chemicals from streets. So cars have exhaust fumes, and these are suspended in air, and when it rains, it's all chemical that goes down in the drain. And then there's also gasoline that, you know, it can be from a car accident, just from a gas spill from your car. So all of this ends up and are harmful to our environment. And something like this can happen. And this is not a common sight in the US, thankfully, due to, you know, proper environmental regulations, but this is very common in third world countries like Nepal and India, where I grew up. So then when you look at this now, it makes you, it's a cause of concern to think about how long these waste materials take to decompose. And as Stephanie mentioned briefly, plastic, as you can see, takes the longest to decompose in nature. And you've all probably seen some variation of this infograph. So paper takes, you know, not that long, and then compost degrades quickly as well. However, plastic, styrofoam, these are materials that take many years to decompose. So luckily, being in rich cities like Boston, we don't have to worry about trash affecting our immediate water supply. So for example, Boston City gets our water from the Quabbin Reservoir, which is miles and miles west of Boston. So whatever the city does doesn't impact directly our water supply. So And similarly, New York City gets its water from the Catskills, and it's one of the water resources. So, and for those of you living in New York, you know, the Catskills is a couple-hour drive away, or an hour drive maybe. But as you can see, it's all uphill, upstream, and it doesn't, you know, what we do in the city doesn't affect our water supplies. However, people who live in suburban areas or rural areas in the US itself rely, there are some people who rely on groundwater for drinking water, and groundwater is affected by your immediate surroundings. So whatever happens in your immediate area, if there's a chemical spill or anything, that can affect your drinking water from the well directly. So that is a cause of concern. And then, as we all know, in third world countries, you know, the nearest water resource is their drinking water supply, and they are the ones that are impacted the most, and they see direct impact on their drinking water supply, you know, due to human activities. So how our waste and consumption affects us directly. So when I talk about waste, it's not just what goes in the garbage, but it's also waste that's created in the production of these products that we put in demand for just by buying them. So like plastic bottles, all of these one-time use plastic usages, these affect us directly in ways such as these. So one of the large emerging contaminant is microplastic, as many of you have heard about it. So microplastic comes from one-time plastic usages like plastic forks, spoon, knives, plastic wrappings. It also comes from clothing, using or buying and washing clothes that have like polyester, synthetic fiber, and then from skincare as well, such as using like microbeads or those exfoliators with beads. And all of these, because they're at a very micro scale, it ends up in our drinking water, or it ends up in our water resources to begin with, and those can end up in our drinking water. And some of you might have heard about there being microplastic in bottled waters, and as well as with our seafood consumption. If we have seafood, you know, the fishes eat it, and then it ends up in us. So microplastic is one of the contaminants that affects us directly. And another emerging contaminant is PFAS. It's a shortened term for per and polyfluoroalkyl substance, which is also known as forever chemical. And this is a very it's a contaminant that's a cause of concern in our field. So they're only recently being found that they're in our tap waters as well as groundwaters, especially in rural areas where there were a lot of there were previously industrial sites. And but they're also they're in sources such as household materials that are non-stick, stain resistant water repellents like pots, pans, carpets, and then it's also in our clothing like rain jacket, boots, and then in the industries that create all of these. And then they're found in our drinking water, as I mentioned, in food packaging. So if you heat up food in you know, in plastic wrappings, part of the plastic might biodegrade or degrade and then end up in your food. It's also been found in cosmetics like lipstick. So there are cosmetics that are like water resistant. So, and then cookware, like I mentioned, clothing, home goods. And it's a challenge specifically to treatment facilities. So treatment facilities are very important because there's water treatment facility that provides drinking water, and there's wastewater that cleans your waste. And these, the technology that's there currently isn't advanced enough to remove this completely, because it's at such a nano scale that there aren't membranes that can filter it out. So it's a big challenge in our field. And another big challenge is that because it's an emerging contaminant, there aren't proper regulations around it. And EPA is now having to look around it, get more research about it, and then put some limitations on it to know, at what amount is good. And then, so maybe some of you might have heard of it or saw it. There's a movie that came out called Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo that covers a real life case that happened. It was a lawyer who brought up the issue of PFAS being found in drinking water wells somewhere in the Midwest. And it was later found that this company, I think it was DuPont, that had created a lot of these Teflon materials. They had been dumping these chemicals for years. So as you can see, our waste, our consumption affects the environment, and then that affects us. And I think more and more, we're becoming more and more aware of that now. And I think what we can do about it, and Acha Kunsang mentioned it, as you all know about it as well, there's reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I feel like I wanted to go through that just like very generally. We've heard about it and it looks like a cycle, so you think you can start anywhere, but I feel like reduce is the most important, like just to reduce the amount of waste that's in this world that each of us are creating. It's the most important thing. And some of the questions you can ask is, like, if you're going to buy something new, do you need this? Like, do you need this new dress when you have 5 others? If you're trying to follow a fashion trend, like how long will this fashion trend last? It might just be for the season. So fast fashion, I think that's one of the biggest issue to, just consuming a lot. And another thing is, can you carry your own water bottle, utensils, straws? Like if you can, just put it in your bag. Like you just reduce so much one-time plastic use. And then I feel like most of us, and I've been guilty of, saying, oh, I'll buy this and I'll donate it. So what, like, I'm doing something good, but that's not an excuse. You're again creating more waste, and you're putting demand on the supplier to begin with. And another thing with donation is that not all donated clothes are used well enough. If it's ripped, torn, stained, no one's going to benefit from it, and it's just going to end up in trash. So a lot of what Salvation Army receives is also trash. So it's not all going for good use. So I think the main question is, do you really need it? And that I think leads to reducing. Then second, reuse. Like, okay, so you ended up getting your new dress, you ended up buying, getting a plastic a coffee in a plastic cup with a plastic straw, but it's like maybe you can reuse it. Like how can you, if it's a one-time plastic bottle, maybe don't just chuck it out immediately. Use it 3-4 times more. If it was a plastic straw, don't throw it out immediately. You can still use it. If it's a dress, you can wear it. I think even a year would be best, but if not, like more than once. And then if it's good, even after years, you can pass it down. And so I think reuse is another step. And then lastly, recycle. I think recycling should be your last option, especially because I think since 2019, when China banned, taking any of recycled materials from the US, that's caused a lot of issues with, the US and local municipalities of what can be recycled, like what can the facilities, the recycling centers manage. And so not everything is recyclable. Just because you think you tossed it in the recycled trash or recycle can, you did something good. But you need to have proper recycling knowledge too. Like pizza box that's stained can be recycled. If you throw a plastic bottle, you can't throw it with the cap. So things like that. So that's why I put recycle as a last option, because you have to do additional research on that. And then, so like if you have an old shirt, I think you can make a bag out of it. And if you have a worn mask in this time, like I've done this, like you can reuse the wire and the elastic. Like if you want to create your own mask. So I heard at the beginning of the pandemic, finding the wire to make your own homemade mask was it was running low. So I was like, oh, why don't you just take it from the mess instead of just using it one time and throwing it? So there's that. I think, yeah, and again, just make sure that, you know, if you're recycling something, be aware of what your local center is doing. Maybe your local center will be different from what someone else is doing in another city. And any way to just prevent waste from going into a landfill, I think that's one good deed done. And yeah, so yeah, this is my contact information for if anyone wanna, you know, talk about water, wastewater, and any of that.